you had a oh shoot. Hope you had a fantastic week since the last time we got back together. Hadn't been a week if you was with us on Thursday, but for the Tuesday people, hope you had a fantastic week since last time we were together. Glad to be back with you for another episode of Swami Live. In this episode, we will kind of continue our discussion on connecting the curse to our four bodies, either one, how it affects our mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual body as a whole. If you are new here, this is Soul Swami Live. On this channel, we discuss all things healing, and we do that in several formats, whether it be through just conversation, prompts, homework, live energy readings, just a bunch of different ways. Even as a matter of fact, Thursday night is a spinoff of our Tuesday night show. Thursday night is a book club. Book club came about with an intention for us to be able to reconnect to the child in us. And what kid really don't like being read to? You know what I'm talking about? So you can catch us every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. And as of lately, I've been keeping Instagram with us. So, but if Instagram start messing up again, then it won't be on Instagram. But guaranteed to catch us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. So if you're not following, go ahead and get subscribe and follow those channels so you can get the notifications for when we go live. The beginning of every show, we generally do some energy work. And this week we are on our sacral, which is interesting because I've been having a whole lot of conversations about how many of us are sacral thinkers, but we don't always recognize that. The sacral resides, it is generally below your belly button, but it incorporates your genitalia as well. So the element for the sacral is water, which I love because I'm a Pisces and that makes me a water sign. The sacral is good for your sexuality. It is the center of your emotions. It is your creativity. It is your pleasure. And it plays a good role in your relationships, right? If you are into aromatherapy, some essential oils that would be good to ignite your sacral would be rose, patchouli, orange, clary sage. If you want to eat some things, you want to think orange things. Oranges, any kind of thing that comes in orange. If you are into crystals and gemstones, you want to think tiger's eye. It's funny because I gave away my tiger's eye. I talked about it on the show, and I definitely did ask them, hey, you still got that tiger's eye? Because I was curious. Liberty, I'm so glad to have you here. And you on Twitch? What? Listen, I need to get all y'all to go on Twitch because it says I need to get 4 viewers at the same time, one more time, and then we start doing the games and stuff. So, but Liberty, I'm glad you're here. I think tonight's show will be a good kind of conversation. But you know, if you are into stones, you want to think tiger's eye, cornelian, amber, orange calcite. That's pretty good. Bronzite is good, even though it's not orange, but it's a very good stone for that. You know, I got my yellow stones. My orange stones sitting up here. I feel a little discombobulated. I keep saying it's crazy. But for the start, we do a little sound therapy, which includes bowls. And then we do a little breath work, which is a breathing exercise. And we do some visualization. But visualizations take on all different shapes. So I don't know what a visualization is going to be this time, but we'll figure it out when we get here. So since Liberty is here, and I know she loves box breathing, we're going to do 4-4-4 for our breathing exercise. But before we get started with that again, we like to start with a little bit of sound bowl, sound therapy. So relax and let the vibrations and the sound help to calm your spirit. Again, for our breathing exercise, we're going to do box breathing. If you are unfamiliar with that, that is 4-4-4. We will breathe in 4-4 count, hold 4-4 count, and release 4-4 count. But all you have to do is really just focus in on your breathing and clearing your thoughts, and I will keep the count for you. So just listen to the sound of my voice and relax, close your eyes, do whatever you feel is comfortable for you. And on the count of 3, we will start. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Last time, family. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. For our visualization, I just want you to imagine yourself standing in a body of water, interacting with water, but in a space where water can cover the majority of your body. Whether you're standing in a shower, swimming in a pool, enjoying the beauty of a lake, or just splashing in the creek. I want you to visualize yourself enjoying interacting with the water. I want you to begin to visualize and feel the healing properties of the water. And as you interact with that, I want you to repeat these sacred affirmations after me. I am a creative being. I deserve to enjoy life. I am emotionally balanced. I welcome sensuality into my life. I am worthy and lovable. I am a creative being. I deserve to enjoy life. I am emotionally balanced. I welcome sensuality into my life, and I am worthy and lovable. So as wild as it is, last couple of weeks we've been doing a lot of work around identifying generational curses. And I know one of the main reasons we did that is because a lot of conversations are around generational curses, but we really never really talk about what those are. And it was even amazing for us to be able to identify 25, because I'm sure you wouldn't have been able to identify 25 on your own. And then after we identified those 25, we are now continuing breaking them down into which of our 4 bodies are affected the most by these curses or burdens that we carry. Last week, I think we were able to finish mental, so we still have emotional, physical, and spiritual. But general, I mean, before we jump all the way in there, I got a couple of things we want to discuss, right? So last week, if you weren't here, one of the things we talked about was loss, right? And we talked about the grief of loss and how limiting our ideas of loss can be, because we only really tie that to the idea of death. But I gave an example of how one of the biggest losses that I faced as a kid was the loss of a collection I loved. I used to love stuffed animals, and they were important to me. And I remember when I moved from California to New York, I had to leave all of the stuff that was important to me. The only thing that I took was my clothes. But anything else that was important to me, because we flew, wasn't no way to be able to pay all that extra money to be able to fly with all that stuff. So it just wound up, Lord knows what happened to it. But for me as a kid, that was the biggest loss. And one of the stuffed animals that I actually talked about, maybe I should have talked about the Dalmatians. I had a bunch of the Dalmatians too, but one of them was this stuffed animal called a popple. And nobody ever remembers what a popple. I'm so happy I made a post about it. And my friend Janie, who I like to call Jamie, she wound up saying that was one of the things that she loved too. And it made sense on why we connected as 18-year-old freshmen at Winston-Salem State University. But I talked about popples. Popples were these stuffed animals that I didn't think about it till I shared it with Liberty, but they are kind of Care Bear-ish. But you can take the stuffed animal and tuck it into a ball. So I talked about that loss and the grief you could experience from that loss and getting over that. And one of the Soul family wound up hearing me discuss that. And out of the goodness of their heart, they wound up getting me a gift. And the gift that they got me was this thing right here. So I guess you could tell it has some pet features to it. I don't have an issue. I kind of like leaving the arms and legs out of it. But one of them wanted to speak to the child in me and help with the healing process like many of us do, and buy me something that wasn't quite the popple, but pretty close. I like to call it a poppington. The popple's cousin. But it is a ball pet. And I can unfold it, and it turns into a little teddy bear. So it has its arms and legs, and it's real cute. I love the idea. I thought it was I'm a sentimental person. One of my gifts is being emotional. And the good thing about that is I don't see that as a negative thing. As we're learning, we're finding those negative things and we're turning them into a positive. So me being emotional wasn't a bad thing. I'm such a sentimental person. So them getting this for me was cute. And I just wanted to share that with y'all. On my ball pet stuff, you ever see him hanging around, you know where he came from. And yeah, I actually do love it. So it makes me smile. I laugh. My little kid that lives inside of me just plays with it a little bit. And I don't even mind if other people play with it. So I let one of the other Soul family touch it for a little bit. And it was funny because they might have been worse than me. They couldn't even keep their hands off it. Every time I seen them, they were sitting up here holding the bear like it's a baby. It's like, it's not a baby. It is a bear. It is a bear. So I guess I got something in common with that question. I would have chose the bear too. But I do love it. I ain't even gonna lie. You can see the smile. You're just genuine. I'm thankful that person. One of the things that I've learned that is important to me in relationships, whether they are platonic or romantic or whatever type of relationship that it is, mother-child, father-child, whatever, parent-child, grandparent, whatever type of relationship it is, something that's very important to me is thoughtfulness. And I like to be seen and valued. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness of it. And also that ties into that thoughtfulness is consideration. I love thoughtfulness. I really, really, really love consideration. And with that one gift, it got a little bit of both of it. So I appreciate you. As always, I don't even know if you want me to say your name. Well, I say your name because I talk about you all the time. But I say Dog Whisperer because nobody else knows who Dog Whisperer is except the Soul family. Everybody in the Soul family has heard Dog Whisperer's name. And and Dog Whisperer knows who she is. Barehanded, I appreciate you on Instagram, family. Thanks for your support. Lady Chev, I ain't seen you in so long. I'll be watching your videos. I appreciate you. I miss you. And everything is fantastic, yo. I appreciate the love too, Natalie. I seen you just came through on Facebook, so much love as always. You know what I mean? I look forward to the day that maybe we can do us a Reiki session or something like that. You know what I mean? But I appreciate you all. So outside of thinking about telling you about the ball pet, the ball pet winds up being a fantastic example. So I've talked about how much I generally charge for individual. Let me say this specifically, because group sessions and things like that, I definitely will put a number price to that. But generally, and I definitely will charge money for that. But generally, when it comes to this healing process or the Reiki or the energy readings, I really don't charge people, right? And initially, I didn't expect anything. But then I recognized that by not expecting anything, I also never created a safe space for people to be able to give me something if they were so moved to, right? So I moved into this space and where I tell people, just give me whatever the spirit moves you to give me, right? And the way the ball pet winds up being a representation of that, because it is something you can give me. It wasn't necessarily money that I can gain, because again, I don't want anybody to miss out on their healing, the services, because they don't have the money to afford it, right? And I recognize that as a people, we have so many gifts that we can give people. And when I create a space for giving and receiving, then people can show up and show out and give ways and things that you never even thought of. So that's one of the reasons why I generally don't put that pressure. I like to move how we used to move with that barter system, where we can trade goods and services, skills and expertise. There are things that I need that you may be able to give that I'm unaware of, and I'll be happy to receive that. So for me, I definitely think that this is an excellent form of payment for all of the Reiki work that I do with Dog Whisperer, and I appreciate the fact that she values it. But going forward, for everybody, when it comes to that and the spirit moves you, there's a space to be able to give and receive, and it allows you to be able to brings to mind farmer's market bag and flowers. I'm confused. That's something that you would give? I don't know. Maybe, am I supposed to remember the farmer's market bag and flowers? I'm trying to think that I give flowers from the farmer's market. I usually don't, because the farmer's market that I was going to here, don't say I guess not. Blame it on my mind and not my heart. You know I'm old. But ultimately, this is space for us to give and receive in each other. So if there are services that you would like to get from me, don't hesitate. You know what I mean? I trust and believe that you are a blessed individual with so much to give. And there is something that the spirit can move you to provide for exchange in the service that I give you. You know what I mean? But I think that's a perfect thing. So I just want to kind of talk about that for the barter system. So just again, if you're out there and you're thinking about it, but your funds are necessarily low, I would appreciate anything that you give. I even think about Kat doesn't necessarily think about that, but Kat is one of the original soul families who got one of the first energy readings that we did, for real, for real. I love her for that, because she was vulnerable enough to cry on the show. But even her, in her own business, she allowed me to have a plate of food that she did not charge me. And that was a perfect exchange for the services that I provided for her. So please believe, everything that you can give doesn't have to be money. Trust and believe in your talents and your gifts and all the other things that you have to offer this world, because they will be valuable to someone like me. Now, I was thinking it was crazy because, not necessarily crazy, but I had an incident, right, over the weekend. I had a Reiki session that I scheduled. Person reached out to me weeks ago and told me how they want to have a Reiki session, and I'm cool. So I did what I was supposed to do. I cleared up my energy. I mean, not my energy, but I did that, of course. But I cleaned out my schedule for Saturday because I knew they had a couple of things that they needed to do. But I wanted to be flexible and available. It's a person I value their friendship. I value them as a person, and I've always thought they were a kind and wonderful person. But in establishing this Reiki session, they wound up. It's funny because they wound up, and for their own reasons, which are not here or there, they wound up standing me up, right? And they sent me a message to apologize, and I accept the apology, but it was difficult for me to be able to respond at that moment, because when we're on this healing path, we begin to recognize if we're honest and authentic with ourselves, we can recognize that when we are triggered. And when we are triggered, we may not respond in a way that is conducive to supporting the relationship or supporting whatever you're doing, right? So after this happened to me, I'm real funny. I recognize that one of the things as people we have to do is value ourselves. And one way that I value myself is I value my time. My time is very important. So if I take time out of my schedule to be able to work with you, or if I leave my schedule open so you can have the flexibility, that means I value, and that's important to me. But one thing that I don't like is remember, feelings are the stories that we tell ourselves, feeling as though someone else didn't value my time. And I recognized when I first started this healing path, or not even when I started the healing path, but when I really started doing Reiki, I ran into a couple of times, and it's kind of like being a stylist or a barber. So those people in those professions understand how people can schedule something with you and then not come through with the scheduled event. That's one of the reasons why a lot of barbers and stylists do a deposit now. Because if people pay a deposit, they're more likely to come through. But when people don't pay a deposit, they don't always value your time the same way that you do, right? And normally in my past, when I'd have these feelings, or I would tell myself these stories, I would be very firm and very rigid. And sometimes I can be to the point where I wouldn't even talk to the person again, because you've shown me how much value you have, right? But again, you remember, we recognize these are feelings. These are just the stories I'm telling myself. So I recognize that I would tell myself these stories to feel better about how I would respond, right? So when this happened, I recognize it's funny that I'm in this space of triggered, right? And because this person is valued, I don't want to be in a space where, because I felt a certain way, I wind up responding to them in a way that will create the same pain that I don't want to have myself, right? So I recognize that I was triggered, right? And when I'm triggered now, I have to ask myself that question. Why am I triggered? What is really bothering me? What is the real issue, right? So I took some time to process my emotions and my feelings, and I came to this conclusion that I recognized when something is important, I can become laser focused, right? And this healing and becoming the best version of ourselves and the best version of me, the most authentic version that I want to be, that is very important to me, right? And I take it very, very, very serious, right? And because I take it so serious, sometimes I can put that same expectation and pressure on others, right? Which can be unfair. So as I process my feelings and I recognize that I take this seriously, sometimes too seriously, which is people would say to me occasionally like, you too serious, you too serious, which would be crazy to me because I would laugh. I'd make all the, if you're around me for 5 minutes at some point and we start talking, I'm gonna make you laugh at some point. So I love to see people laugh. So I can never connect on why people would say I'm too serious, but it's that right there. When I'm focused on something and something is important to me, I'll hold that thing, I'll put it on a plateau and surround it with high standards and expectations. And all that does is wind up creating a pressure on myself. And then I'd also pass that pressure on to other people. So in recognizing that I was in a space of triggered and recognizing how I normally process these things or handle these things, I had to think a little bit more about what have I been learning about people since I've been on this process, right? So generally, when it comes to Reiki and energy readings and all the other things that I do, I meet three types of people. The first person I meet, and because we resonate together, they are serious about their healing and they are focused and they're willing to do almost anything to heal themselves or become the best version of themselves, right? So I meet the first person, and that is a person who's like us. We know we need the healing. We're on our path. We're working on it. We're creating these safe spaces. We're taking part of these safe spaces. We're being vulnerable. We're modeling behaviors. We're changing behaviors. We're thinking about how we process our actions, why we think like that. Is that how we really think? We think about that and that resonates. That first person is the soul family. That is the person who not only knows they need the work, but they are actually taking the steps to do the work, right? And then I meet a second person. The second person is the person that is not going to do the work. I gave an example. I met someone and they talked about how they love all the healing stuff. They love how to see how people are doing the healing. Like they like to watch it. They like to be a part of the energy, but they also confidently tell you, I'm not doing any of that. So there are those people who are comfortable being who they are. They don't see the point or purpose in trying to do this healing. Even though they may enjoy the energy and they love it for other people, they couldn't necessarily see it. And then those people, there are also people are just afraid. We've been carrying these traumas and these experiences so long that they've become our identity. And if I let these things go, I no longer know who I am. So some of these people, there's a fear-based thinking, and we talked about a fear-based thinking that allows them to keep carrying those burdens, and they're not going to do the work. So the first person is doing the work. Second person, not doing the work, won't do the work, don't want to do the work. And then it's the third person. It's the person that, for lack of better words, the easiest way that I can describe them is the person that it's kind of like riding the fence. They dabbling a little bit here and there. They do a little bit, but then they take a 5-year break. It's the person that'll go to therapy, but not necessarily doing anything else. Therapy is it. Not even also struggling to apply what they've learned in therapy to their behaviors and all those things. Is the person that is kind of doing it. They're curious. They might come and get a session and I don't hear from them again. They're just kind of dabbling in it. And I recognize that these are the three people that I'm meeting this. So when I meet these people, I can't be upset. I can, but it's not fair to hold them against them, right? And that this isn't to say that any one of those things are better than the other, because again, we've learned what's good for me may not be good for you. So good and bad is not that simple. It's more shades of gray. So we're not saying that either way is good or bad. We're just making sure that we can identify what is, so that we can begin to accept things for what they really truly are and not as we would have them, right? And I recognize that in my own life, that is a space of healing that I need to do in working on accepting things for what it is. Because I've always been one of those people who I feel like with the right ingredients, there's always something I can do to change, adjust, to help, benefit, anything to do something with the outcome. But we've learned there's many times in our life that there's nothing we can do. We can just accept it for what it is, right? And when that happens, we have to make sure that we monitor our feelings so that we are not telling ourselves stories that reinforce negative thinking, negative ideas, limiting beliefs, or any of those things, right? So I say that to say is for you to ask yourself, what category do you fit in? And it's funny because another reason why I take it so serious is I read this book. Well, I started reading this book, and it's called Sigil Magic or something. Sigils, about sigils, using signs and putting your intentions in these signs to create the magic, the energy, right? And one of the things that he said in the book is, it's not a game for play. It's like you can't be a part-time healer. You got to go full time. You got to take it serious. You got to do the things that are necessary to be able to reap the benefits of your actual work. And that is value it and prioritize it, right? So I recognize that and I go out into the world with that same thing. But because I have that understanding, that doesn't mean everybody else does. And one of the reasons I have that understanding is to help other people get that understanding. So if you are in a space that you feel like you need it, and one of the things that I said to this person, which I firmly believe when I did respond, it's okay. But you do have to prioritize your healing, and you do have to make the space for it. You have to take back some of those pieces, some of your energy that you've been giving to everyone else so that you can have it for yourself when it's time, right? And then, that was interesting. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about is this idea of loving yourself, right? I think a lot of us come into this healing process with an idea of we need to love ourselves more. We even give that idea and that way of thinking to others with the best intentions. When the person is not behaving in a way that is conducive to their well-being, we'll tell them you need to love yourself more. And we talk a lot about self-love, self-love, self-love. But one thing I know about love is very interesting and it's all encompassing. There can be someone who can love you and not be loyal to you, right? So as we talked about it, one thing that I recognize outside of that is you love yourself, but the real question resides in how much do you respect yourself, right? And for many of us, we think that respect shows up in love, but no, it doesn't necessarily have to, because we've all experienced a love that lacked respect, whether it was a love that we personally experienced it in our own life and experiences, or we learned through it vicariously by seeing others' experiences or hearing others talk about their experiences, right? And we're talking about this again because I want you to really ask yourself, is self-love the issue, or do you really need to work on your self-respect? Right? Is your self-love high? And is the way that you're living showing you that not only do you love yourself, you respect yourself, right? So one of the reasons I talk about this too, a perfect example for me, is when I began to exert sexual discipline, right? A lot of that, initially you think that is about self-love, but I love myself. I love myself more than anybody else. That's not a problem with me. I've never had a problem with loving myself. But even though I love myself, I can look at some of the decisions I've made, some of the things I do, the ways I have lived my life in the past, that although the love was high, the self-respect was low, right? So as we're working on this self-love, I want you to really pause and think, is love the answer, or is love the issue, or do we need to work on our respect? Are we living our lives in a way that says we respect ourselves, we respect our bodies, we respect our minds, we respect our spirits, we respect all four of our bodies, right? So that's a question for you to think about. Is self-love the issue, or is it really self-respect? All right, for that, family, that's the general conversation. We're going to get back into I did all that jaw jacking for y'all. What we were talking about last week. Let me change this camera. Video capture device. Not front cam. Side cam. Boo, boo, boo. All right, family. So last week we were able to complete the mental. Make sure we own it. The mental aspect of it. And what we've done, like I said, we identified those 25 curses, and then we broke them into which of our mental, spiritual, physical, or emotional body that it connects to, right? And again, we're doing this so that we make sure that we're using the right tools to address the issue, right? We identify the issue so we know we're using the right tools to be able to address it. So of the curses that we identified, the ones that fit into our mental were living in survival mode. That is a mental body issue. Lack of financial literacy, fear-based decision making. That is a mental issue. Internalized racism or colorism. Distrust of institutions. We even talked about school, which most people understand school, but the one that's being taught so much distrust now is the institution of marriage, right? We talked about limiting beliefs about success and achievement. Is a mental disconnect. Low self-worth and self-esteem was a mental, or is a mental thing. It connects directly to your emotions, and emotions connect directly to your feelings. Again, feelings are the stories we are telling ourselves. And then the last one was stigma around mental health. People haven't gotten the help because they're worried about the stigma around being identified or diagnosed. So next we're going to move into the green section, which is our spiritual disconnect. So this is the curses that affect our spirit. The first was silence around faith and purpose. That is a spiritual disconnect. And one of the reasons there's so much silence around faith and or purpose is because, as much as we like to say that God is omnipotent, we put them in the box. We see it all the time. It's one of the reasons why so many people are no longer identifying as religion, because it has become a new way for us to be able to judge and devalue each other just based on religious beliefs, right? Which is why so many of us live in this space that we don't even talk about our faith or purpose. When it came about God, the most that our family talked about God was we can see him at work in our life. The closest we got to church a lot of time was living by the church. And when I did go to church older with my family, a lot of times we'd fall asleep in there. Which again makes you ask, what is the purpose? It has become so routine that we have lost the purpose. So many people know the word. They are talking the word. They are using the word to judge. But they forgot that their purpose is to be the living word, not to know the word, not to use the word as a weapon, but to become the living word, right? The next thing that is a spiritual thing, and it's so easy for you to be able to connect it to a mental, but it is rigid expectations. Rigid expectations is a spiritual thing which ties in perfectly to the story that I gave at the beginning around healing. Healing is a spiritual thing that we're doing. We're trying to heal our emotions. We're trying to heal all these bodies. But healing is a spiritual thing. It raises your spirit. It vibrates you to another level. And because we are doing this, we take it so serious. But that can put us in this space of rigid expectations. I was beginning to become so rigid that I almost forgot that there are various people on this path and they approach it various different ways. But because of my rigid expectations, leading even up to this point, I was unable to be there for people or be able to understand people are fighting their own battles. So your rigid expectations of people can be the burden that is keeping you separate from those things that you need most, and that is relationships. The next thing is disconnect from ancestral traditions. It's funny. I was watching this video, right? And it was an African guy talking to a black guy. And the African guy was Muslim, Islam, African in Africa. And, there's this idea that black Americans have no culture, which is very interesting. Very interesting because of the role we have played in creating American culture and how long we have been here, right? So this Islamic African was arguing with this black American about how we have no culture, right? And the black American asked them, well, how are you Muslim, right? And the Muslim African goes on to tell him this, right? So then he asked them, what is your ancestral traditions? What religion, what spirituality did your ancestors follow prior to you being Islam, right? Disconnected from the traditions that have gotten him so far. The dude, actually the African Muslim, was pretty good because he did know what his family studied prior to that. And he was able to say it was Yoruba. He asked them what his tribe, he said what that was, and then he said they were Yoruba. They studied Yoruba. So then the black American asked them, well, what is that? And the guy was like, I don't really know. Disconnect from your ancestral traditions, right? Even in America, some of these religions that we follow have disconnected from our ancestral traditions. I see so many people online. As a matter of fact, I just seen a guy talking about how yoga is of the devil. Disconnected from how much movement means to our people, that now he ties movement into being of the devil. And when that Muslim African said that he was Yoruba, and I, as wild as it is, in college, we had to take a foreign language. And throughout high school, I took Spanish, right? So when I get to college, I say I'm going to take something different. And I went to a HBCU, and they were offering an African language. And it was Yoruba. I still remember the book Yoruba Land. So as wild as it is, dude didn't know what it was. But I had more knowledge on the spiritual beliefs, the spiritual rituals, all types of things, right? And then I ask you, how disconnected? One of the reasons your spirit cannot get right because you no longer have respect for the ancestors. You're not doing the things that got them so far, that allowed them to make the foundation for you to be able to even choose to be a Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or whatever. The blood on the land, on the earth that they did, the sacrifices they made so you can do that. We are so disconnected from that to now that we think that things that will heal us are now of the devil because we fear what we don't know. And unfortunately, we're unwilling to do the work to know. The other one is suppression of spiritual identity. In this way, many people who feel as though they are disillusioned by religion, they've just come to a space where there's suppression of their spiritual identity. They don't know who they are, or even when they do know who they are, they're afraid to be able to live spiritually out loud. They're afraid to become the living word because of what that might cost, how they might be judged, the ways they might be perceived. It was funny. So one of the soul family, when we started this generational curse, one of the soul family shared it with their friends, right? And the friend was so against us using the word curse, because the friend felt as though curse is something that can be changed, which lets me know they're living in a space of spiritual suppression, because instead of thinking about the way these things actually hurt them, the way to identify them so that we can change them, they just hands off, right? So when the friends tell me they're upset that the person is like, I can't believe y'all use curse. And I had to express to them, you don't worry about that, because we will not suppress our spirit to make those feel better, right? There are going to be tough words. You know, we talked about this. When those words begin to trigger feelings and emotions and feelings, we have to pause and ask ourselves, why does that word bother you so much? Fear-based teachings is very different than fear-based thinking, right? But fear-based teaching, honestly, as I think about this, one of my main examples of this is one of my guilty pleasures is watching Kendra G singles. It is wild on there sometimes. It's just wild. But on fear-based thinking. So on that show, they have men and women talking about what they want, right? And one thing I hear a lot, I don't just hear it on that show, but I see it a lot in the world on social media. I hear it a lot in the world, in conversations, in places that you go. But they want a God-fearing mate. And that doesn't make sense to me. No matter how many times people may explain that, it does not make sense. Because why would you fear your own freedom? Why should I fear something or someone that loves me so deeply? Parents taught this. They think it's sense to have a healthy dose of fear. And that doesn't make sense. Because when people get scared, they do irrational things. So sometimes people cannot even follow the word because of fear-based teachings. One of the reasons people don't go to church because they try to fear you to death. Oh, you do that, you're going to go to hell. This happens, you're going to be this. If you don't do this, it's so much fear-based teaching out there. Right? That is incorporated into our lives. That we're afraid of everything. Marriage, relationships, dating. People will get out here and talk about how there's pee in the dating pool. Fear-based teaching. You are telling everybody else to be afraid of dating because there's pee in that pool. That is a spiritual issue that you need to address. You need to rebuild your spirit so you will no longer move from a space of fear, but begin to be in a space of love. Again, your heart is the most magnetic thing that you have. Love is the answer, not fear. Then a spiritual issue is religious and cultural shame. And we talked about religious shame, and the story we used was that point in time where when young women used to get pregnant as teenagers, and then they would have to stand in front of the church and let everybody in the church shame them. Or when the family wants to try to hide them at home because the child got pregnant young, it's shame. So much shame. Even when it comes to cultural shame. The perfect example I use is when the Muslim African was talking about how Black Americans have no culture. That is cultural shame. We have our own Black Americans, families who have been here since the 1700s, 1800s. Some of us been here, were already here. I just seen a post where Native Americans have to admit that they were Black Native Americans finally. They're finally ready to admit. So some of us were already here. Not all of us were part of that transcontinental slave trade. But once we have that skin tone, it didn't make a difference. You all Black, right? But that cultural shame, they're trying to shame us into believing that we do not have a culture, as if we didn't invent American culture. We are the creators of culture. Feeling ashamed that you have no way of life is a spiritual thing, not recognizing that your way of life is your culture, is a spiritual issue. Next, we have our physical. The generational curses that affect our physical body. One is overwork and burnout, which ties into the limiting ideas about success. See how they connected? You have limiting ideas about success. A man that don't work, don't eat. I gotta have 5 jobs to be able to build this house. So now we're functioning in this space of overworked and burned out. And most of us do not know that our mental is off. So it's pushing our body off. If you are working more than you have time for your own life, that is a physical disconnect. And many of us don't recognize that we have that issue until we are faced with physical problems such as stroke, heart attack, diabetes, all of those things that affect our body. They are physical things, right? And it ties into, like I said, our limiting beliefs about what success is. Sitting down and relaxing makes us feel like we're doing something wrong. Many of us don't even know how to rest without feeling some sort of cultural shame, right? The next one is a physical thing, is neglect of health and wellness. This is easy to see. We like to say it's an American problem, and it could be. Well, I'm not worried about America. I'm worried about our people. Neglect of health and wellness. We can easily see this by how fast the weight has grown. If you look it up, what was the average weight of a person in 1965 versus now? You will see at least a 60, 70 pound difference, right? And it is partly true that there are more chemicals and things like that that affect our body that's being put in food. But the part about that we don't like to say is we choose to eat that food. We choose to neglect our health and wellness. I had a friend make a post the other day and it kind of stays on my mind. I'm going to tell them about it too. But I seen this post. They've been working out. They've been no longer neglecting their health and wellness, right? And they said, nothing tastes as good as being skinny feels. And that hit home. For a person who has struggled with weight issues in various forms throughout his life, I agree. Nothing tastes as good as feeling healthy, feeling well, and not only feeling them, but actually knowing, because you've taken the steps to be those things. So the generational curse of neglect of health and wellness is a physical issue. Abuse. And in this one, we talk about physical abuse, not necessarily emotional, because that's a different type of abuse, right? So physical abuse. And the funny thing about it is we physically abuse ourselves in so many different ways. So when we think about physical abuse, we talk about actually like hands-on harm, like hitting, punching, biting. Physical abuse is just only hands-on. But physical abuse takes many different forms, right? There are those people that we know that cut themselves. That is a form of physical abuse. But you know what else is another form of physical abuse? regular masturbation. I met someone and they said they masturbate every day. They are physically abusing themselves. Right? Another way physical abuse shows up that we don't like to think of it is, and I have them. So I'm not speaking from a space of judgment. I'm speaking from a space of I learned that I was physically abusing myself when I got these tattoos. And I used to see people, they'd look at me and they'd be like, you got those tattoos? That's crazy. Right? And then they say, how could you sit there for all that pain? Because physical abuse was normalized in my family. Physical abuse has been normalized. I bet everybody who got a tattoo also got whoopings. So even though we know it's a way of expression, the process of getting them is physical abuse. A physical issue is substance abuse. You know, it's funny. I ain't even know if I want to talk about this, but Monday night, I always talk about, we have a men's meeting, and I love the men's meeting. The brothers, we talk about a lot of different things. And, what's going on? Okay, I was trying to check the comments, but they gone. So there was a point in time in my life where, as a matter of fact, it happened for a lot of people in COVID. So one thing that wound up coming up a lot in COVID when people were trapped in the house for so long was substance abuse. Alcoholism went through the roof. People were drinking every day. And through COVID, I had some free time. I had a girlfriend. We just hang out and drink and have a good time and drink and drink and drink and drink and drink. And then, of course, by putting these substances, not having the respect for your body, regularly putting these substances in there, it was a physical issue. It creates physical problems. Blood pressure, weight gain. I seen this thing where this guy said, if you're wondering why you're not seeing your gains from working out, check your alcohol use, right? And it sounded crazy, but as a person who was working out and then drinking all the time, it was keeping my gains. It was a physical issue. Using substance is letting you know that you have a physical disconnect that you need to balance out. And the wild thing is, after I stopped doing that, I was amazed at how I could, listen, why was I doing that? Why was I abusing myself? Under the guise in having fun. Or I need this to relax. Or anything like that. We will tell ourselves our feelings are interesting things because we'll tell ourselves all types of stories to reinforce the emotions or our beliefs. Lack of exercise is a physical disconnect. The body functions so well on movement. It creates that serotonin to help you be a little bit calmer. As a matter of fact, for my master's thesis, I did how to include music and movement into your teaching methods, right? And why that is important is because moving makes it easier for you to learn. Movement makes it easier for you to retain. Movement makes it easier for you to solve. And many of us, when we start getting the weight of the world, burdens of responsibility, the first thing we take away is movement, lack of exercise. And part of that reason is because we have limiting ideas on what exercise is. I've been trained in office exercise, in how to get in shape in your chair. Which is, I laugh because it's a wild concept, but it is a real thing. It's a real thing. And the importance of that is because it keeps your brain moving, which is good, right? Poor eating habits, your diet, is a physical disconnect for you. The foods that we eat, again, is like I said when we talked about the weight gain. What is your disconnect? We choose the food we eat, and nothing tastes better than being healthy, right? So these poor eating habits, man, listen, the easiest one that people use to justify their poor eating habits is they don't like to cook, right? But what is that doing to your body? You're putting your wellness in the hands of other people, hoping that they will do right by your body because you don't value yourself enough to be able to cook for it in your own love, right? And for some reason, we only think that you have to like cooking to do it. But that's not true. There are many things that we do because we understand the importance of it and we don't like it. Like go to work every day. None of us likes to go to work every day, but we do it because it's important. I cook all the time, and it used to be funny to me because people would just say, "Oh, you love cooking." And I used to think that was crazy. I don't love cooking. It is work. It's a lot of different steps. But you know what I do love? Eating, right? You know what I do love? Eating food made with care. You know what I do love? Eating food made with love. You know what I do love? Not eating all these processed chemicals. You know what I do love? Living. And living requires you respect your body enough to put the things in there that are necessary, right? Poor eating habits is a physical curse that you can make the choice to break for yourself, right? The last one is emotional. We got a little bit of time, so we'll chat that up too. The last one is emotional. The first and emotional is an obvious one, but lack of emotional availability. But what does that mean? It actually means the ability to be present, the ability to be able to give yourself permission to feel all the wide range of emotions that we get the opportunity to feel. That means being present enough to be able to allow people to feel their feelings without feeling some type of way. I remember when one of my closest friends, as a matter of fact, God rest my man's soul, T. White. And if you from my neighborhood and you know me, you know who T. White is. But T. White, I remember when he moved in across the street from me. And I remember when he came to Winston-Salem State. And I loved that man. And life and responsibilities made him feel like the only way that he can do it was a different path. And he wound up leaving school and taking his chances on this different path. And unfortunately, that path led to his demise. And, you know, a parent losing a child is one of the roughest things to be around. But one of the more interesting things that I would see is how unemotional available that a lot of parents would be because of that. They couldn't be a space for that mom because they were worried about how much it would hurt them if it was them, but it's not you. And because you're not available, you're missing out on learning, healing, and growing for yourself. Emotional availability is being able to make these connections with people, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to actually express your feelings, allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to hear somebody else express their feelings about you, and it not be positive. We've put this wall up because we've been taught that emotions can be a downfall for us. But that's not the downfall. Emotions are not a downfall. Lack of awareness of our emotions is the downfall. Lack of the tools of being able to process these emotions are the downfall. Those are the things that create us to be in a space of emotional unavailability. Next is comparison and competition. Always comparing yourself. Being in a space where you're always compared, which happens a lot in siblings relationships, is a burden that will affect your emotions. It is a curse. That is an emotional curse, right? Toxic relationship patterns. Again, we confuse the familiar with a norm. And because we confuse the familiar with safe, and because of that, we have a tendency to repeat toxic relationship patterns, right? So my growing up, I didn't really get to see, at least in the women in my family. I've seen it outside in the world and other people, and it would be strange sometimes. And many of us, I met this girl, she had the same thing. She was like, I'm trying to break this generation curse because no woman in my family has a man, and I want to have a man. So I understand that. But one thing that was normal was lack of respect for masculine, for men. A lot of people put themselves in a space to be able to judge men. And that space of judging men, or that space of judging women, is a toxic relationship pattern. Because who are you to judge? Right? So when I got out in these relationships, one thing that didn't really matter, or one thing that I justified as being normal, is lack of respect. I've been with people who love me to death, but when I look at the respect, it was not there, right? And many of us repeat these patterns. One of the reasons many of us have opted out of dating is because when we do, we pick toxic relationship patterns. And because we don't take the accountability for our choices, we blame other people. They are toxic. They are toxic. But no, the only people that can be with toxic people are toxic people. So if your relationship patterns are a history of toxic relationships, you know what that means, right? You vibrate on a plane of toxicity. You are the toxic person. It is an emotional thing. And that's why you disconnect yourself from those behaviors, because you know how it affects your emotions. Unresolved grief is an emotional thing. And I'm just going to show you the ball. Because even at this age, I had those popples. I was in first grade, second grade. So what is that? 10? I don't know. 7, 8. I had them things 7, 8 years. And I can still remember how much they meant to me. Unresolved grief. People carried it around like a badge of honor because they're afraid to navigate the emotions. Unresolved grief is an emotional disconnect. Chronic victim mentality. Again, we talk about that, but we don't always understand what that means. A chronic victim mentality is a person that thinks life is happening to them and not for them. That is an emotional thing. They don't allow themselves to feel emotions. They don't allow themselves to experience emotions. So now they live in this chronic victim. They think everything is happening to them and not for them. They don't even recognize one of the favorite things. Well, not one of my favorite things. One of the interesting things that I hear people say, sometimes rejection is protection. But because they're not willing to navigate the emotions and be honest with themselves, they think that they're a victim. The people who opt out of dating and relationships, they do that because they think that they're a victim. They live in that chronic victim mentality instead of recognizing that they're not a victim. They are an active participant in their own demise. Fear of intimacy and vulnerability. One of the reasons I appreciate the Strength and Brotherhood group is because it is a space as men we get to practice our vulnerability, right? We get to say some of the things that we wouldn't say to anyone else without fear of being judged, without fear of somebody telling us how wrong we are. Now in that group, we hold each other accountable, but we don't beat you where you're afraid to be able to tell us. We want to be able to hear that voice. Many of us are afraid to be truthful and honest. And that is an emotional disconnect. Many of us, the one example I use, the people that opt out of the relationships, that emotional disconnect, that fear of intimacy. They're afraid that being intimate might create the what ifs, the what ifs. We talk about it all the time. The what ifs, the what ifs, the what if, the what if. The what if is killing us slowly. Shame shows up again. Shame and guilt cycles. Not only does it affect your spirit, it affects your emotions. Many of us are whipping ourselves with shame and guilt over our mistakes, with shame and guilt for what people have done to us, with shame and guilt. We've boxed our emotions in so we can't even get past that cycle of shame and guilt, as if those are the only emotions that we can feel, because that's where we think that we deserve. That's where we think we are. We think that that's what life is. We've normalized shaming ourselves and feeling guilty. We've been conditioned and socialized into a system where shame and guilt keeps us bound. And that does not mean that we need to live in a way that is not healthy to the whole. There is a space for shame. There is a space for guilt. But later on, we're going to talk about what the positive connect to that is, so we can understand a little bit better. There is a space for these things, but in our lives and in our world, there are more emotions to feel. You're supposed to move from guilt into something else. Shame is an accountability emotion. Shame helps you acknowledge that you made a mistake. You could have done better. You knew better. But shame is not a space that we're supposed to stay in. We're supposed to move on to a more stable ground, right? And the last one we will cover in emotional today is emotional suppression. One of the biggest things I wind up doing with many of the people I do work with is having a discussion where they can begin to give themselves permission to feel emotions, right? And that winds up being the biggest struggle for a lot of people, because they go back to those cover emotions. As we talked about, anger winds up being a cover emotion because anger is so accepted in society. We'll use anger when we're really just frustrated. We've suppressed frustration. We've suppressed guilt. We suppressed a whole bunch of things. We just let anger show. We suppressed how it is to feel love and to give love because we're worried about their vulnerability. We suppressed the wide range, the spectrum of emotions and feelings that we're supposed to feel. Each word that we do, we call it spelling for a reason. Each word has an emotion that it creates. It's not just a word. It has an energetic connection. Each word creates an emotion. And again, emotions are natural. Feelings are the stories that we tell ourselves. But we suppress these emotions because some of them don't feel good. Or we wind up chasing the emotions that we think feel good, like happiness. So many people are chasing happiness. But what do we talk about? The people that chase happiness are the least happy. Because energetically you're projecting to the world a spirit and energy of lack. You're trying to get happy because you don't have it. And what do we say? The world doesn't prove you wrong. It proves you right. Your subconscious creates 95% of your reality. So what have you manifested in your life? And is it because you don't allow yourself to feel the emotions? Was that taught to you? Were you in a space or raised in a household where people could actually say their emotions, what they really felt? I know now, I look at the older people in our generation, in my families, or in older people, period, not even just in my family. One thing that they did to get by was emotional suppression. We have older family members and we don't know nothing about their childhood, anything they really experience, how they feel about anything. So that's why they always given these rigid ways to live life, because they have done so much suppression that they love the guise as sacrifice. All right. So family, that is our 4 bodies and our 25 generational curses that affect our mental body, our spiritual body, our physical and emotional body, right? So next week, what we're going to do is, now that we've identified the 25 generational curses, we've identified what body it is affecting, so we can have the right tools to address that. We're going to draw a direct connection to the blessing. Because again, the only reason why we're functioning with these generational curses, the only reason why these things were passed down to us, is because the burden of the blessings. And with the best intentions, many of our foreparents, our forefathers, foremothers, didn't want us to experience the burden of these blessings. So they gave us the best advice that they could. But that advice wasn't helpful because it created new problems. It wasn't better. It just created new problems. And unfortunately, with these new problems, we don't have the tools to be able to address them, nor can we go to the older generation to be able to get the tools, because They don't have them anymore, right? So we will again go through our 4 bodies. Let me see. I might have it on here. Boom. Can you see it? Hold on, family. Did we switch? Nope. Okay, just don't worry about it. But next week we'll wind up. Hold on, I might be able to show you real quick. Doo-doo-doo. So you get an idea of what that looks like. Yes. Boom. So this example is it. So we'll go through this a little bit deeper. We'll go through our generational curse and the direct blessing, because again, we're going to start functioning in our authentic selves, and that is recognizing our gifts. And we now are equipping ourselves with the proper tools to be able to recognize our gifts, right? So family, I appreciate you. Hey man, I ain't see all that. This is crazy. So, oh, you on YouTube? I've been looking for the comments in the chat box, and they have not been showing up in the chat box. But amazingly, they're still on screen. So I appreciate you, YouTube family, as well. Girl. CC, you know you ain't attacked. As a matter of fact, I'm putting up business out there. CC is the sole family that got me the ball pet. So when y'all start seeing her around, don't be acting like she's somebody new, because she ain't new. She out here doing the work. She got darn fighting a good fight. I'm so proud of her. Knees getting strong, all types of things. That's one of the people. I'm proud of all of you all that's doing the work, but she part of the family. She doing the work like the rest of us. She making them hard things. She allowing herself to feel emotions. So it's fantastic. I'm proud of the work that we do. So again, Thursday, we will continue reading Lucretia and the Croons. We'll probably finish that up this week. And if we do, I actually been thinking about reading this Marcus Garvey book. One of the brothers in Strength and Brotherhood was like, maybe that's why you was thinking about it, because you need to read it to the people, a message to the people, which is good. So we might pick up that after that. I'm definitely going to go back to our book list to see whatever book we can do. So hopefully you can be here Thursday as we do book club. If you can't be here Thursday, I hope to see you back here on Tuesday, where we will begin to draw the connection from our curse to our actual generational blessing. Because as long as we focus on the curse, we will not be able to see our blessings, right? So family, I appreciate you. I value the time you share. I'm glad that you prioritize your healing and the moments, and I'm glad that you help us create this safe space for healing and growth. I thank you, and hope to see you Thursday. And if I don't see you Thursday, I hope to see you next Tuesday. Again, family, I appreciate you. Much gratitude, and peace, family.